lots of questions about the animal stuff, so y'all be coming up with lots of questions to fill the rest of the time block. But I'm just going to go over just very briefly, kind of superficially, using the oils in the animals. And it really is not much more than that, honestly. It's not complicated. I mean, we know how we use them in ourselves. So there's just a few safety things really in the animals that we have to consider. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is one of my dogs, Candy. All of the animals that you'll see throughout here are all of mine. She's a Beagle Chihuahua mix. She was my first spay that I did in vet school, so I had to adopt her. So just a little bit about me. I graduated from Gaston College in 2005 with my vet tech degree. I worked for 3 years. I knew when I was in vet tech school that I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I was a little afraid to move away from home, and I also wanted a break from school. So I worked as a technician, realized I wasn't going to be happy doing that, so I started going back to school. Went to NC State for vet school and graduated in 2015. I worked for the first couple of years for other people and wasn't happy doing that. They were not supportive of my use of oils and other natural things in animals, and so decided I need to go out on my own. So actually this month we're celebrating a year that I started my mobile practice, DocTerRA Mobile Veterinary Services. So the name DocTerRA was because of it being my name, not because I use the oils, which I get asked that all the time, but it just kind of worked out. Love it. I also am a short-term missionary with Christian Veterinary Mission. So they're based out of Washington, but they're a worldwide organization who sends veterinarians, their spouses, veterinary technicians, lay people who are just interested in animals and serving and ministering to people in that way. They send them all over the country, all over the world, doing these trips. I do not do long-term trips because I don't feel God has called me to that, but my husband and I do participate in short-term trips. There's a trip we go on every year. That this will be our 3rd year now with the University of Missouri. We go to the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, Sanders, Arizona. And we go and do all sorts of animal work, veterinary services for them, but it's an avenue to reach others for Christ and share the gospel. The Navajo Reservation is considered an unreached people group. So, and I say all that just because I want everybody to think about them and pray for them and us as we go on this trip, because it is definitely really close to our heart and definitely what God has called us to do. So I enjoy using my skills in all different areas. I am, of course, a doTERRA Wellness Advocate. I am elite and have been stuck there for a while. This is my 3rd elite retreat as an elite, but my veterinary business kind of occupies my time. So have not been a very good business builder. All right, so when we think about using the oils in animals, we have to remember that, like I said, we use them in a lot of the same ways that we use them in ourselves, but with us, we're one species. With the animals, there are multiple species, and they're all very different in the way they metabolize things, from prescription medications to natural supplements. And so we have to take that into consideration. So with dogs, all dogs are going to metabolize things the same, but not all dogs are the same size. So the little dog there is my mom's Chorky. She weighs 6 pounds. The Great Dane is my sister's, and he weighs, last I heard, 120, probably a little more than that now. So we're not going to give them the same amount of oils or supplements. We've got to take that into consideration. Dogs, their senses are very strong, so we talked about that a little bit with us, how strong our sense of smell and all is, but theirs is even stronger than that. So we need to consider that, and a lot of times they seem even kind of offended, especially my little dog Candy. She's half beagle. Her nose is very sensitive, and she does not like essential oils, even though she needs them a lot of times, because her sense of smell is just so strong. It's shocking to her system when she smells it. And they are monogastric, so that means they digest things very similar to the way we do. They have a single stomach. Their liver is a little different in the way it metabolizes, so that is one of the things we have to take into consideration. So we're going to dilute things a little heavier than we would maybe in ourselves. With cats, cats actually have more hair follicles than most other animals. So domestic cats and big cats, if you're working with the wild animals, so that means they're going to absorb the oils a little more readily. So again, heavy dilution. You can actually just apply the oils directly to their hair, and they're going to absorb that just as much, if not more, as applying it directly to their skin, because there's so much more surface area with all of the hair. Again, very strong senses in cats, and their liver is even more sensitive than dogs. So this is one of the reasons why veterinarians say don't use your over-the-counter pain medicines, which most of us in here probably don't even use for ourselves, but don't use those for animals. And the joke in veterinary medicine is if you show a bottle of Tylenol to a cat, it will kill it. That's how sensitive their liver is. So we really have to think about that when we're using the oils. And horses, again, there are many sizes of horses, the very small miniatures all the way up to the big draft horses. This is my horse Cruiser, and I skipped my cat there, Trixie. That's our barn cat. She's 14 years old now, slugging along. This is my horse Cruiser, and again, strong senses with them as well. I would say not as much as dogs and cats, but there's still a very, very strong sense there. A lot of people you may hear say, the animals kind of choose the oils that they need or that they like, and that is very true. I think if you put some things out for them, they will go and kind of pick what they need. But just because they don't pick it doesn't mean they need it. Go back to my little beagle mix. If it was up to her, she would never have any oils because she doesn't like the strong smells. But she's very neurotic sometimes, and she needs some lavender. So she gets lavender whether she likes the smell or not. So their senses are strong, and they do have more understanding of what their bodies need, probably even more than we do sometimes. But just because they turn their nose up to it doesn't mean you can't use it on them. They are hindgut fermenters, so the way they digest things is going to be a little different. Horses generally need a little less of things than you would think for their size. So medications and such, their dosing sometimes is very similar to a dog, even though they're so much bigger. And it's just because their digestive system metabolizes it differently. Ruminants, we get into a whole different ballgame. So goats, sheep, cows, even llamas and alpacas are considered pseudo-ruminants. So they have a rumen. It's a fermentation vat. And so when they digest things or you give them things orally, their body most of the time is just going to tear it up and spit it out. They're not even using it. So even when you consider prescription medications, there are very few that we can use in them that are actually going to benefit them, because that rumen it's so acidic and so full of bacteria, and that's good. That's the way they digest, but it's bad for medication purposes. So even with the oils, I tend to use them more aromatically and topically with them because we don't know enough about using the oils in the animals to know if orally they're really getting benefit. So if I'm doing them orally, I usually tell people don't necessarily have them ingested to the point of swallowing it. It's more to contact the mucous membrane so it can absorb that way, because I'm afraid if it gets to the rumen, it's probably just going to be junk. It's not going to be used. And then that may not be 100% true, but with most of our medications that is the case. So I kind of err on the side of caution and don't want to waste oils. So, strong senses, you see that as a trend all the way across the board, and they are, like I said, foregut fermenters, so that rumen plays a big part in the difference in their digestive system. Birds, they have very little taste buds, which is to our advantage that we can give them a lot of the oils orally or internally, because they're not going to be as opposed to them in their feed or their water, because they're not going to taste them as much as other animals would. They do have a very sensitive respiratory tract, so especially, and I have their chickens versus parrots, especially your house birds, and the parrots and parakeets and things like that, they're much more sensitive to things in the air, and so you do want to be very careful with diffusing with them, and even applying it to them topically to where they're going to be breathing that, because their respiratory tract is just so sensitive. So just heavy dilution doesn't mean you can't use it, just need to dilute it appropriately. Versus chickens, they're a little hardier, in any other, turkey, guinea, anything like that you could be using on. They're hardier than your what I consider house birds. So still sensitive respiratory tracts, but not quite as sensitive as the others. So application for them is really the same as the way we would use it ourselves. So aromatic, topical, internal. So aromatically, diffusing it, again, just, you're not going to make it as strong if you've got a little 6-pound dog versus a, human or a 120-pound dog. But you can diffuse. I put up here neat. I don't know if that's really technically the right way to say it, but what I consider neat is this picture here of the horse smelling it right out of the bottle. So you're not diluting it in your diffuser with the water, but you can actually drop it in your hand just like we breathe it in out of our hands. You can do it that way, or just holding the bottle up to them as well. And then also in the litter, so for cats, that's a really good method, because as long as they are not opposed to the smell and you're not making it too strong, then they should continue to use their litter box. And as they're scratching in the litter, then they're causing kind of the diffuser effect, if you will, in that way. So that is recommended. I have not personally used it in that way, but that is recommended in a lot of the literature. Topical, so petting. So the animals that may not want you directly putting it in their face, they won't know it so much if you rub it in your hands and just pet them and give them a good belly rub, and you're getting it on them that way. And like I said, on their hair, that's just more surface area for the oil to absorb. So in the beginning, as I was using the oils on the animals, I felt like I needed to shave a little spot to get the oil on them, and you don't. It absorbs through the hair just as much as it does the skin. And you can use it neat, again, depending on their size. You don't always have to dilute it. You can just put it directly. And then sprays. I use sprays a lot. It's a really easy way to dilute it. Of course, animals like cats probably don't like to be sprayed so much, but you can still take that spray, rub it on your hands, and then pet them with it. So I would say that's probably the most common way that I'm using the oils with the animals, is in a spray. I typically, as my dilution, people don't want their pets to be oily and greasy, so I don't use the fractionated coconut oil as much. I use distilled water. So you just have to remind people to shake it up before they use it so the oil disperses in that water, but that's a really good way to dilute it out and to apply it, and especially in a diffuse area on the pet, to use the spray bottle. Internally, you can put it in their water. We use peppermint in our dog's water just to help freshen their breath a little bit. But you can, if you're trying to treat some sort of bacterial infection or any fungal infection, viral infection, you can use the oils for those in the water as long as they continue to drink it. So again, some animals are going to be more picky than others with that, so you have to be careful with that, not to give them something that's going to deter them from drinking the water. Food and treats. So my sister's Great Dane had some digestive problems. She would take the Digest-In and drop it right in his food. And most of them at first are like, that's different. That's not my normal food smell. But they don't really taste it so much when it's a big bowl of food. So you can directly put it in the food. Treats. Stephanie has done that with digestive problems with her horses. She's made treats with the Digest-In in it, and just give them a little treat, and they're ingested that way. Then you can also use the capsules just like we would use. So same thing as you would with the prescription medication, just hide it in a piece of cheese or a piece of bread, or whatever. They'll take it that way as well. I actually used some in a capsule with one of our goats one time too. She did not like me just dripping it in her mouth. She was not going to eat it in her food, so I put it in a capsule and just popped it down her throat. So that's really, really convenient to use that way too. All right, so the safety, and that's the big thing that you will hear from people who are not familiar with oils or who have just been misguided in using the oils in animals. And I was a little skeptical about it at first too, because of course, being in veterinary medicine, this year will be 20 years that I've been in veterinary medicine. That's really all I've done since I was old enough to have a job. And it's just drilled into you, the medications. So then when something new pops up, it's like, oh, is this, I know my medications, I'm used to that, but I don't know if I feel comfortable using this. And of course, you never want to harm somebody's pet, and especially nowadays, pets are more like people's children. So you never want to do something that's going to harm them. You want them to feel comfortable with what you're telling them to do. So a lot of the things I've used on my own animals before I put it into practice with my clients' pets, and happy to say I've had no adverse events. And we all know this, the safety thing is the purity of the oils. That is where all the negativity comes from, on Facebook or wherever you're reading, Googling it, is the oils people are using are not pure, and that totally makes them unsafe because of all the additives and things that are in those supposed oils. That is what is harming pets and is going to harm people too. They just don't realize it yet. But they are, because animals are so much more sensitive to things, and the way they're digesting things differently, it doesn't take as much to make them sick as it would with us. So the cases that you will read about, some of them, it was completely unrelated to the oil, and whether they were using a good oil or not. It was completely unrelated. The event that happened, it was just coincidence that the owner had been using the oil and then the pet got sick. But in most of the cases where it was pretty confidently placed on the oil, the reason that the pet was sick was because it was not a pure oil. It was the chemicals in it that made the pet sick. If they had used doTERRA, they wouldn't have had that problem. And in my practice, I run across a lot of clients who are already using oils or kind of dabbling in it a little bit, know a little bit about it, and they don't all use doTERRA. And so all I can tell them is that doTERRA is the only oil that I recommend. If they choose to use their oils on their pet, that is up to them. But I cannot recommend any other oil but doTERRA because I trust their purity and of course love the company as well. So I do push for that, and I have had several of my clients, several that have used Young Living, that have purchased the doTERRA from me to use for their pets because they know that that's safe, because I'm telling them I use that and that's what I recommend. And so even though they're using the Young Living themselves, they're purchasing the doTERRA for their pets. So it makes me happy. Always have a vet consult before you're using the oils. Don't just jump in and just start using stuff, because for one, you're doing your pet a disservice, because what you think may be going on with your pet may not really be the issue. There may be something bigger than that, and so you don't want to just be messing around with it at home and it be something more serious. So always, even if it's just a phone call, just make sure you have the veterinarian aware of the situation. I think the problem a lot of people will run into is that there are not many veterinarians who are going to be supportive of using this stuff. And that is, I'm hoping that's going to change as time goes on and they'll get more comfortable with it. But I've had a lot of clients come to me or switch to me because I use the oils and they want to be able to do that. And so that's why I try to promote it. Not that I don't use traditional medications in my practice, because I do every day. There is a need for those, but I try to incorporate the natural stuff as I can. But it's very, very important to make sure that your veterinarian is on the same page. So if people are coming to you and saying, hey, what oil should I use for my pet? Just say, you know what? You could probably use an oil, but why don't you go see the veterinarian first and let's get a diagnosis of what's going on, and then we can talk about that. And I'm happy to field those questions and answer things for you if stuff like that comes up. I am not on Facebook personally, but I do have a business page, and my mom is on Facebook, so you can bug her with the questions and she'll get back to you from me. But I always recommend that we get a diagnosis first. So slow introduction. Any books or literature, anything that you're going to read on using oils in animals, it's always going to tell you to start out slowly, so in your frequency and also in your concentration, really dilute it out in the beginning. And then if you're not getting the response that you want, then increase it from there. But we don't know how oils affect animals as much as we know how it affects people, because there's just not the money put into the research and the studies. And in time, we're going to know more and more because there are people using them and testing them and doing studies. But right now, we don't know as much, so we just need to err on the side of caution. And so we always start out very slowly with them. And then, again, remembering the species differences. A cat is not a small dog. We were told that every single day in anatomy class in vet school because they're very, very, very different in the way they're made up. And so we do have to take that into consideration. All right, so I just want to go through some testimonials. This is one of our very adorable potbelly pigs, Penny. And we also have her sister, Patty, who I have in here somewhere. So wounds, this is one of the really big things that I use the oils for. And a lot of times I reach for that because antibiotics aren't always necessary in every wound. A lot of times, honestly, the body can take care of itself, but the owner wants something to do. They don't want me to tell them, just keep it clean and it'll heal. They want to do something. And so the oils are something that I can give them without pumping their pet full of unnecessary medications. And the oils do help the wounds to heal a lot faster. Not that they wouldn't heal on their own, but it does help them to heal a lot faster. So Buddy had this place on his chin, so if you can tell from the picture there, his lip is kind of in the corner there. So right under his chin, it was very, very itchy. And actually this was the second year he had this problem. This is my sister's horse. And could not figure out why he was getting this. It was the same time of year, so maybe some type of allergic thing. Had no idea, but he would rub himself on the fence or whatever he could rub on until he had all the hair rubbed off and just a raw wound. And so before we were using essential oils, she had used all types of just antibacterial cleansers and stuff and creams and trying to stop the itching so it would heal, and nothing really worked. She just kind of battled it until the seasons changed and then he got okay. So then once we started using oils, decided to use that instead. So this particular episode, she did first start treating it just with the soap and then this MTG spray, if any of your animal horse people, mane, tail, groom. It supposedly is good for anything, kind of like our frankincense. You don't know what to use, you use this spray, but it smells terrible, like rotten eggs. It's awful. But yeah, it's supposed to help for everything, so she's like, I'll try it. So she's putting that on, it's not improving. And so I was like, let's just try to use the oils and see what that does instead. So typically for my wound spray, I use the copaiba, frankincense, melaleuca, and lavender. And I will usually have On Guard in that as well. She decided instead of putting the On Guard in the spray, she felt like she really needed to clean it because it was just crusty and oozing. And so she used the On Guard cleaner concentrate. So she just mixed it up just like you would to clean the counters in your house, but just used it directly on his skin. And so she was cleaning it with that. She mixed up the spray minus the On Guard, and 6 days later, that's the results that she had. And within 2 weeks, it was completely healed and the hair was growing back. And before, it had been the whole season that she went through battling it. So amazing. And I have many more stories of using that wound spray. That in a lot of dogs with allergies, people will just keep a bottle and just use it as needed. And when the dog starts, it's usually a particular spot. It's one dog in particular, it's her neck. And just for whatever reason, just scratch, 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 and makes this raw place right in the center of his neck. And so when they see him scratching, they just pull the spray out and start using that for a few days and it'll clear up. So there's some kind of allergy component there that we're probably not going to be able to control because it's something in the environment. But if we can manage the irritation when it starts and not allow it to become a wound, then it's a lot easier to treat. So Bunny here is actually Stephanie's, one of her bunnies, had this place that ended up being abscess. And nasty, ruptured. You can see that the hair came out. So she actually used the Flume mixture, or Flomo, however y'all are used to calling it. So the frankincense, lemon, On Guard, oregano, melaleuca. She was applying it topically on the forehead and on the ears, and within 2 weeks it had resolved, and you can see the hair's growing back and looked great. So some masses that I've seen. So Roxy was a lab older labs, she had a tumor on her shoulder, and we did surgically remove it. It was cancerous, but we were able to remove all of it, but it was in a really tough area to close, because on the shoulder there's so much motion. The owner was not compliant with what I asked him to do in restricting her activity, which is the biggest challenge of my job most of the time. So her wound ruptured open because she was too playful. And so he called me in a panic, or actually he sent me an email with these pictures, and in a panic, this thing is coming open, what do we do? I said, it's all right, I'll be there. So I went out the next day and I cleaned it up, and I said, we're not going to be able to close that back up. It's not going to stay at this point. And what are we going to do? There's this big hole, there's a big hole. I was like, okay, it's all right, it's all right. And he already is one that is not crazy about using medications in himself or his pets, and so he was really for using the natural stuff. But I said, it needs to be something easy that this guy can do, because compliance is not great. And so I said, I got this Correctex ointment. This will be so easy. Just put a little dab on your finger, wipe it on. So I had him doing that twice a day. So day one, he sent me that picture, and then the next day I cleaned it up so it looks a little bit better in the second picture, because I had cleaned it up. As you can see where the sutures pulled through. And then day two of the Correctex, you can already see how much quieter the tissues look, and it's already starting to close in. And then day 6, we just had that little small hole, and that's when I went back and had removed all of the sutures. And then within another week, it was all completely healed. And we did no oral antibiotics, anything, just the Correctex, and he was just cleaning it with water. So Rocky had a lipoma, so a lot of y'all are probably familiar with that. If you've had dogs, most dogs end up with them, but Rocky had a big lipoma. It's just a benign fatty tumor that they'll get. Schnauzers are real bad to get them. He had one in the center of his chest, and it was baseball size, and about half of that was sticking out where you could see it. And so we came up with a blend to put on there, because we could remove it, but it's benign. It's not really hurting him unless it continues to get bigger and restricts his movement. And so we didn't want it to get to that point. So she started putting that on. We made a roller bottle is the way she applied that. And she was very faithful in doing that, very compliant. And I just saw him maybe a couple weeks ago, and the lipoma is probably half the size that it was, and it's very soft. Where before it was very firm and very tight under the tissue, and now it's smaller, but it's also much softer. So the oils are breaking that fat down. So I don't know that we'll get complete resolution of it, but at least it's shrinking, so we don't have to worry about it restricting his movement. So that was a neat one. That was the first time I had used it for that. So digestion, this is another huge one. We use it a lot for digestive stuff. Colic in horses is a very common issue. They have about 100 feet of intestines, and so there's a lot that can go wrong with that 100 feet, and it happens a lot. So this is also one of Stephanie's horses. Day one, he was showing signs of colic. I went out and saw him. We gave a Banamine injection, which is like horse Tylenol. And he seemed to get okay, relaxed, okay, and it's just some gas. The next day, he was uncomfortable again, not eating and drinking, so she started using the Digestin orally, topically. She's very compliant and a very good client who is there with her animals and can do this stuff very frequently. So it makes a huge difference. And so she did that every 30 minutes. Within 3 hours, he was eating and drinking. And then she did the treats, like I talked about earlier. She did the treats for him after that. This is also Stephanie's dog. Her poor pets have lots of problems. She just has lots of pets who have problems. So Belle had pancreatitis. This was prior to me being her doctor, but she at the first episode had to be hospitalized and on fluids and all for the pancreatitis episode. The second time, Stephanie gave me a call, and I said, well, let's just start using some Digestin. She did that, used the PB Assist probiotics, and then she, after that, started eating chicken and rice. Signs resolved in 7 days. She did continue the treatment, which is always important. Just like with prescription medications, you don't stop taking it just because you feel better. We've got to continue, especially in a situation like that when it's inflammation, you've got to continue to control that inflammation so that the pancreas can heal. So very, very important to continue that. So you can see the cost comparison there, and definitely not to neglect the fact that veterinary care is needed, because as a veterinarian, that's my livelihood. So I don't want you to not call me, but it's not always necessary with the hospitalization if we have the oils that we can turn to. All right, lameness. This is our 33-year-old Apache. He got some cellulitis in his leg, and oftentimes with cellulitis there is infection there. It's not always just the inflammation. It's not typically even from an injury. It's just with him, I believe it's just his circulation is not great because he's an old guy. And so he was starting to get a little puffy. You can see the back part of his leg, so to your right. He was starting to get some swelling, so I mixed up a spray. He had previously had an episode in his back legs that I had him on 2 different antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, doing mud wraps to try to draw the fluid out of the legs. And we battled it for about 2 weeks before I finally got it resolved. Again, that was pre-essential oil usage on my part. And so I used the spray, and I would spray it on, and then I would massage his legs. So whoever it was that mentioned earlier, massaging the oils in, working them in makes a huge difference. So I would massage those in, so you can see by day 3, you can see the line of his tendon again, where he doesn't have all that inflammation. So, and then I continued for about a week, and he was good to go. So I'm going to see if this video will play. This is Stephanie's horse. Tendon strain, we have no idea what happened to her. Thank you to Stephanie for all these wonderful testimonies.
I document everything.
Had no idea what happened to her. She was new to the pasture, so don't know if she was aggravating the other horse and got kicked. I'm not really sure. But she was extremely lame. She called me, we talked about it, and I did go out and see her the following day. But the first day, she started the Deep Blue Rub and the polyphenol complex twice a day. She did continue it for 5 days. I'll stop here for a minute and caution you on, a lot of people ask what oils can I not use in animals. There are very few that you can't ever use. But wintergreen is one of the ones I usually say if you want an oil on a list of never to use, it's wintergreen. Because it's basically aspirin. And it will cause a lot of stomach problems. So you don't want to use that one in general. Of course, wintergreen is in our Deep Blue oil and the rub, and so I only use it on occasion. So in these situations, like with the horse, we used it for the 5 days, and that was it. We're not going to use it any more often than that because it is like giving them an anti-inflammatory medication, so it can cause stomach ulcers and things. So we do have to be very careful with that. And I generally just tell people not to use it in their small animals, just because I don't trust the amount that they're going to use, and if they're going to dilute it properly, I just don't want to take that chance. But me personally, I would use it, for a few days if needed. And I'm going to see if these videos will play here. So you can see how lame she was. Pitiful. Ouch. Ouch. And then this is the next day after Deep Blue. So still a little lame, but not near as bad as she was.
She looks like a cow.
All right. And that's all I've got. I have so many more testimonials that I could share with you, but I won't bore you with all of them. But if anybody has any specific questions or anything I didn't cover,
Talking about the ones you can't use, would you consider Melaleuca one not to use overly on like small animals?
yeah, so that's another one that, people will say, be very careful, be very careful. Again, it's just all in how you're using it. So I always put it in my wound spray, and I've used it on my cat, I've used it on my dog, used it on horses. But again, so for my wound spray, I use a 4-ounce glass spray bottle, and I do 14 drops of lavender, 10 of Melaleuca, 8 of copaiba or frankincense, and 5 of On Guard, and the rest is distilled water. So it's very dilute. but it works. I came up with that recipe from one of the veterinary books that I have. She basically just lists the oils that are recommended. There are no specific recipes, so you have to just kind of come up with it on your own. That's the recipe I developed that I felt like would be safe across the board with the different species, and it has worked great. So it is not one that I am as fearful of as some people are, and I think I have gotten past that just from the readings that I have done from other veterinarians who have used them a whole lot more than I have in animals, and done more trial and error type stuff on their own animals and such, and using, you know, stronger concentrations versus diluting. And so I don't have that fear of the Melaleuca that a lot of people will put out there. Again, I mean, it's, you know, the Melaleuca, the oregano, cinnamon, I'm trying to think, any of the other, like, what I consider really strong oils, or some that, you know, we call the hot oils, even your citrus oils, you just really want to dilute those really heavily. But in, you know, in certain situations, in the book that I have that I use specifically, you know, in certain situations, if it's like a life or death situation for the pet, like, you know, if it's the oil that's, you know, potentially going to help them, and there's nothing else that's going to work, then, you know, that's what I'm going to reach for.
So I get asked questions like about hot spots, and so you would use Melaleuca on a hot spot, and it would be okay to do that?
Yeah, so I would use it in like the wound spray. So I wouldn't, that's not one that I would use, I would even be very careful with just using that as, you know, a lot of times I will just put a little bit of fractionated coconut oil in my hand and then drop, you know, 1 or 2 drops of the oil, mix it in and rub it. I wouldn't even use it that strong, because using it in the wound spray, it's much more dilute than even that. So if you're gonna, you know, do it in a roller bottle or something that you can really heavily dilute, then yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to use it. I have not seen any issues with it, and from the things that I have read and other experiences with other veterinarians, they've used it with a lot of success and safety.
Would you repeat the recipe?
Yeah.
Yes. So 4-ounce bottle, I do 14 lavender, 10 Melaleuca, 8 frankincense or copaiba, or you can do both. Those are both great. And then 5 of the On Guard, and the rest distilled water. Yes.
You were saying the deep blue polyphenol, how many tablets, like, for a horse?
Yeah, so it depends on the individual. It depends on the severity of their lameness. So my 33-year-old is generally on 2 a day. He had his chiropractic adjustment recently, and he was real painful in his neck, more so than usual. And so we've gone up to 4 a day for him. And I'll probably just do that for a week and then back him back down to the 2 a day. My sister's horse is a thoroughbred, was off the track, has lots of bone chips in one leg that she didn't know about originally until he developed the lameness, and he's older now and developed some arthritis, took some x-rays, and like, wow, didn't know that was there. And so she has him on the deep blue, and I believe she pretty consistently does 4 a day for him. But he's a little more severely lame than ours. So it's very dependent on the individual animal. In dogs, I have a lot of dogs on the deep blue capsules. I have a 190-pound Saint Bernard that is on 4 a day. I think he could get less than that, but his owner is scared to death to change anything that we've done because he's doing so well, and she can afford to keep him on 4 a day, and that's what she wants to do. So I have another one, a friend of mine that has a 50-pound lab mix, and she gives her a half a capsule a day. I have a miniature donkey that has a lameness. He gets a half a capsule a day, and he does fine on that. So it's just, you really, honestly, in my opinion, can't overdo it on the deep blue capsules. The wintergreen is not in the polyphenol complex, so we can safely use that. And I've seen amazing results with it. It's been great.
So for floppy-eared dogs who tend to get the bacteria in their ears and all that kind of thing, what would you suggest for prevention of that? And would I ever put a little bit of lifelong mortality in the food? And what kind of food would you suggest?
Yeah, so I think the wound spray is good for that. There's actually in the book that I use, her name is
Melissa Shelton.
Melissa Shelton is the veterinarian who wrote the ADR book for animals. She does have a recipe in there specifically for an ear spray. And I think most of us probably been told, like, don't put the oils directly in your ears or your eyes or your nose. But she actually does recommend spraying it in the ear. So obviously you're not directing it all in the ear, but you spray it over the ear, so some is running down in the ear. Again, it's very dilute. She has a different recipe in that, but it's very similar to the wound spray that I use. I have a girl I go to church with. She has used that wound spray in her dog's ears for infection and just spraying it, you know, in the outer part of the ear. And then as far as the LLV, I know Lisa Anderson, Melinda's cousin, she had a couple of her dogs on the LLV. And one of them, she was dealing with some autoimmune problems, and she actually, the dog was not doing well, and so she took her off of the LLV and was just using the oils topically, and I think she was using some internally as well, and the dog improved. So I'm a little conflicted. I don't really understand how it would hurt them, but we haven't used it enough. So Dr. Shelton, who wrote the book that I have, she's a Young Living person, and so she's not using LLV. So she doesn't, you know, have anything to say. She does use all of the Young Living supplements and stuff, which I'm not familiar with, but she does use them a lot and recommend them in the book. But I'm a little hesitant about using the LLV. I don't have any of my animals on it, and I have not recommended it to anybody, just because of the situation with Lisa. It's like, makes you a little gun shy. So I think the omega capsules, I don't think there would be anything wrong with that. But as far as the other stuff, I don't think we know enough about it for me to safely recommend
Really, the
that.
wound spray and then the omega.
Yeah, the omega. Yeah, so in any fish oil, you know, they make the dog specific. That's the liquid pump that goes on the food that they take a lot easier sometimes. And then as far as a food, I always say stay away from chicken, beef, and pork. Those are usually the things that most dogs are allergic to if they have a food allergy. So fish is the main one as far as an over-the-counter food that I recommend that they go on. The whole grain-free thing, we kind of touch on that for just a second, but I'm not a huge believer in going grain-free with the animals. I don't think there are enough animals that truly have issues with that. There are some that people know that their dog has an issue with it. It's mostly the meat protein that they have a problem with.
So what are they supposed to eat if they don't eat grain? I mean, if they eat the grain food, so we can buy them regular grain food,
Mm-hmm.
and then if they like to eat stuff that goes with like people food, then.
Yeah, so with allergies, you have to cut all of that out. Yeah, you have to be on a very strict diet with the allergies with them. So my sister's dog has severe skin allergies, and he's on a prescription food, and he eats the salmon and potato food, and he has special treats that go with that, and otherwise he can eat some raw carrots and kind of bland things like that, but otherwise can't give them any table type food. They have to just be strictly on their
Tara,
diet.
something that you said to me that I had never really thought about was when my dog, he said, you could use the probiotic,
Mhm.
but not to use the kids because
Yep.
of the xylitol in
Yes.
there.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with that, because the xylitol is something that animals cannot handle. It will kill them very quickly. So just be very, very careful with any of that. And I will caution you, just because it's been out there, peanut butter now. Some of the peanut butters, they're using xylitol in. So a lot of people use peanut butter to give their animals their medicine or just as a treat, and a lot of animals have gotten sick from that because people don't realize that the peanut butter has xylitol in it. So yeah, xylitol is in the kids' probiotic powder, so you cannot use that one. The adult, the PB Assist you can use, but not the kids.
The fatty tumor blend, my black lab and hound dog, I took him to the vet because he had a knot on the back leg, and she said it's a fatty tumor. We're just gonna watch it. Can I have the recipe for that? Because I'd love to see if that would shrink that.
Yes, I will. I have that on my phone. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I can give that to you.
Thank you.
share that, please.
Unless Stephanie knows it, she's been using her dog. Do you remember it? You don't want to talk on your phone?
I don't remember it.
Okay, I have it on my phone. I can get it for you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So is PB Assist something that you just should start adding, or only when they have a digestive issue?
Yeah, so I think the probiotics are good anytime,
Okay.
because as we've already talked about today, the gut is the root of a lot of problems, and so it's the same in animals. So yeah, I mean, putting them on that is fine. There are very, very good dog specific or animal specific probiotics out there too, and a lot of times and most of the time, I recommend those because a lot of them are powders that go on the food, and they're just easier. So with the PB Assist, for a 60-pound and bigger dog, then I'd be fine giving them a capsule a day. I think that's probably overkill on a 6-pound dog. And those capsules, I tried to split them before, and it's a mess because it has the liquid with the powder, and it's a mess. So they're not easy to split. So unless you have a bigger dog, I wouldn't just go to using those. I would get a dog specific so you can measure it more accurately.
I had somebody ask me about heartworms in dogs, because they were afraid to use the heartworm
Yeah.
preventative. Do you have any?
Yeah, so do not stop using your heartworm prevention. Please do not stop using it. Any veterinarian who, should be any veterinarian that you talk to who uses essential oils will tell you, do not stop using your heartworm prevention. There are some oil protocols that they have kind of experimented with. There is nothing that has been 100%, especially in the southeast. We are inundated with mosquitoes and heartworms, and so you do not want to take your dog off of heartworm prevention. You can certainly use your TerraShield spray and things like that to help control mosquitoes, but don't take them off of the prevention. Heartworm prevention is very, very safe and has been around for years and years and years, and many dogs taking it every month, and it is not worth that risk. I'll tell a quick little story about a boxer that I saw. People had 3 boxers. They had 2 dachshunds in the house, 3 boxers outside. The dachshunds in the house were on heartworm prevention. The boxers were not. They all 3 were heartworm positive. But the first one, they called me out there because he was having episodes of passing out when he would get real excited. Well, it's because he had heart disease because he was full of heartworms. And so we tested him. Yep, he's heartworm positive, but he was already to the point of heart failure, and so he was not a candidate for the injectable heartworm treatment at all. And I said, you know what? I use essential oils. If you're open to it, this is how much we'll be spending. The only other option for the dog would be surgery to remove the worms, and he was not even a candidate for that, nor did they have the money to invest in that. And so they were willing to try it. We put him on several other supplements, heart supportive supplements, and we did the oil protocol, which was a pretty intense protocol. They were very good to follow it, and the dog lived probably 2 months, I think. And then the congestive heart failure just got so bad that we just couldn't control it, and he passed away. But their other 2 dogs, thankfully, had not developed heart disease yet, and we did treat both of them, and they ended up spending a little over $2,000 to treat them both. So keep them on heartworm prevention. The oils are great for many things, but that is not one of the things that we have a good idea of what we can use to completely prevent that. Fleas and ticks are another big one that people ask about. Ticks especially spread lots and lots of disease, and so I don't recommend taking them off the flea and tick prevention either. The essential oils do a good job with preventing that, or repelling those, if you will, but you have to apply it very, very frequently, like every other day. And to me, unless you have a little house dog that only goes out in the grass to use the bathroom and comes right back in and is not going to have the chance of really getting a tick on it, then you're probably okay to do that. But if it's a dog that spends most of the time, outside, I would use your flea and tick prevention.
Which
and
do you
use
think
it
is the
year-round.
safest?
I like the chewable products.
NextGuard.
The NextGuard is a good one. I use Simparica, is the one that I use. It's the once a month. I mostly use that because of the price on it. It's a little bit cheaper than all of the other ones, and it does just as good a job. Most people can afford it a little easier, but any of the chewables, you know, all dogs are different, just like people, and some are going to have reactions to things, you know, and there have been some dogs that there are, you know, suspected issues that they've had from taking the flea and tick medication, but it's a very small percentage. And there are so many options out there, you know, for that stuff that if they have a problem with one, we've got other things we can try. So yeah, I definitely recommend continuing to use those products, medication products for them. As good as the oils are, we need to make sure we don't have heartworms and fleas and ticks.
Have you treated a dog with diabetes?
I have not. No, I have not. I would be interested to do that because I know the oils have helped a lot of people with that, and so I can't help but believe it would in the animals too. But I haven't, thankfully, haven't had that yet in my practice.
What about thyroid?
Yeah, again, I haven't had the opportunity to have to do that, but Stephanie did have the same horse that had the colic episode. He had a high thyroid, which is very, very rare in horses, and we did try a pretty extensive oil protocol on him. We never could get his numbers to come down, but he clinically looked better. He did put on weight. She'd also changed his diet a little bit at the same time, but his heart rate came down a little bit. He had a real high heart rate, had gotten real thin. And so we clinically saw some changes, but in his actual blood work, we never saw the number come down, but that's not uncommon with natural supplements. Herbs are another thing. A lot of people use a lot of herbs, and it's the same thing. You don't always see the numbers come down, but clinically you'll see results. So yeah, I think there's, you know, definitely a place for trying stuff like that. And with a lot of these things, like I said in the beginning, it's how the oils can complement and enhance traditional medicine. So it doesn't mean that the animal can come off of their medication, just like with people. It doesn't mean that you can come off of that medication, but the oils may help you to feel a little better and help these signs to resolve a little better than they are with just the medication. So.
Aren't you glad to say?
One question.
Go ahead.
What about Cushing's with horses? Have you had any? I know that.
Yeah, so I have not used any oils, but there is an herbal supplement that a couple of my clients have used. One, she's just now starting her little mini horse on it. She had him on medication for the Cushing's before, and he did not do well on it, and that's kind of a common theme with a lot of the minis. It's just the dosing is too strong for them. They stop eating and just don't feel good. And so she just quit giving him anything, but she's very much into using the essential oils and herbs. And so there is an herbal supplement that a lot of people have used with a lot of success. And so she's just started him on that. So I'd be interested to see what his numbers are like. The other client that I had using that, they're actually the ones who introduced me to it. Their little mini has passed away since, but she had Cushing's for years, and she could not tolerate the medication, and that's all they used for her. And her numbers stayed almost in normal range all the time, just with using the herbal supplement. So I'm sure there are oils that would do a good job with that too. I just, again, haven't had the opportunity to use them. And I know this herbal supplement has been really good, so it's an easy, you know, go-to for people.
Do you have the name of it?
It's called Balance EQ. To look up the manufacturer. Foxden Equine, I think maybe is the manufacturer of that.
My phone died.